welcome back to another episode with Fight Night Picks. As always, we're brought to you by SimBody. Vertiball is now SimBody. If you head on over to their website, simbody.com, you're going to get all the great products that you know and love, including the SimBody Vertiroller and the Vertiball that you have seen most likely here in studio. Look at that. Place it, lock it, attach it, Vertiball, all sorts of great stuff over there if you want to roll out those old tired muscles and you don't want to go with that old lacrosse ball. They're also coming out with that very new product that you can see right in front of you. And if I head on over to my cart, look at that. I've already got a Vertiball over there. Little bit of a deal right there. And if you hit the try for 60 days risk-free, use the promo code FNP and you're going to get 10% off your order. With that code FNP at simbody.com, you're really helping out another local company here in New Brunswick, Canada. Can't wait for it. The new name, SimBody at simbody.com. And as we always say, let's get into it.
A last look at the big card. Be sure to head into the chat and have your say. Let's get into it and join in Fight Night Picks Kicks.
And just like that, we're back and we're getting set for UFC 292 up in the marquee. You can see it right there. Aljamain Sterling taking on Sean O'Malley. As always, one half of your hosting duo, Craig Allen. X and Instagram still feels weird.
It does. At
CraigAllenFNP. With me to my left, to your right, it's not Andre Ward, because that'd be weird if Andre Ward wore his own shirts. It's Matt Allen at MattAllenFNP. Respective socials. With some big-time fights coming up today. I mean, 2 title fights up at the top. The Ultimate Fighter finale, Season 31. You got Brad Katona taking on Cody Gibson. We found that out on Tuesday night of this week. And Austin Hubbard taking on Kurt Holobaugh as well. You guys over there in the chat. Morphatrix, Kicks Good, Clint, Stryker, Eldar, Orlando, Chandler Witt, who's all over the darn comment section and all about that big-time Mario Bautista fight coming up against Devon Blackshear. I know you're about it. Spectre, or just Specker, not Spectre, like the James Bond movie. Craig Hart, Branch Above.
What's up, everybody?
Dan Hipp and VT. So, yeah, some really big fights coming up this weekend.
The return of Chris Weidman.
The return of Chris Weidman, who's going to be taking on Brad Tavares, kind of curtain jerker to the pay-per-view. And when you're watching a card like that, you're kind of getting yourself excited. Then you got to fork over the whatever it is, $74.99. You get to hear the little snippet that the in-arena folks get to hear from Bubba O'Reilly. Do you think when they chose that song to be that lead into the main card, do you think they watched Joe Parra Talks With You and they were like, Bubba O'Reilly by The Who?
Bring back Face the Pain, one of the most aggressive intro songs of all time.
Yeah, that one was intense, but again, some big-time ones today, and I know we're very fired up for it. You guys continue to fill up that chat. Make sure you toss a like throughout the show. You can hit up the super chat, because that chat, it will get moving very quickly. And if you want to be a part of the show as well, you can hit up the individual fight polls. It's on our Instagram stories, and they're always at Fight Night Picks. You can find them there. Matt, when we're trying to talk about fight of the night, I think this is a big-time one. Armin's looking to see if we could share his medical GoFundMe on our social. I don't know where to find it. But, Matt, when we do talk about it, possible fight of the night, there's a lot of really big ones. I think this one, it might steal the show. It is on short notice. Out, we said this at the start of the week, it's a guy with 2.7 million Instagram followers, supposed to be taking on a guy with 8,000 Instagram followers. And in is Devon Blackshear, got the 3rd overall twister in UFC history. Bryce Mitchell, Korean Zombie, Devon Blackshear. So Blackshear, 135.5 for today. You love to see it. And some people were like, this is not a short notice fight. This is a very short notice fight. Though, for Blackshear, the nice thing is, he was originally supposed to fight Brady Heastan last week that will strike but will wrestle. And Mario Bautista, great wrestling in his back pockets, pretty good boxing overall. These two guys, I know Bautista's higher in the divisional rankings, but I think they're going to go absolutely wild in this fight, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
And Bautista, I'm surprised he's taking this fight. I said that at the start of the week because, like you said, he had a massive opportunity to go out there and fight a guy in Cody Garbrandt that maybe Garbrandt's not at the peak of his powers, right? But that's still a big name to have on your resume. And this is just a difficult fight. You hope the conditioning carries over for Blackshear because, like you said, had a fight only a week ago, so hopefully some of those skills are able to carry over throughout the week. But this is probably a better matchup, if we're being honest, than the Garbrandt-Bautista fight. Because let's say Mario went in there and knocked out Garbrandt in the first round. Everybody gets excited, but how much do we really learn in that situation? Not much.
Well, I don't know. I mean, Kai Kara-France, he was able to do it, and then he goes into a fight against...
It was a while ago. He's been knocked out a few times now. I don't think a lot of people are looking at Cody Garbrandt like he's in the prime of his career.
Well, second pick, and I know the Vera fight, and that's going to get a lot of the headlines against Pedro Munhoz. Munhoz, but you look at Gregory Rodrigues taking on Denis Tiuliulin. This is Rock'em Sock'em Robots at its finest. Now, maybe this is the fight where Gregory utilizes some of the judo and his world-class jiu-jitsu, but for Denis Tiuliulin, pop, 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 and he just continues to go after it. Doesn't really throw any leg kicks. He just aims for the head. So I think this is going to be an awesome fight while it lasts a minute.
And Gregory's been saying that during the week. Hey, I know what people think I am, this big brawler, but I'm going to get back to my roots. So maybe we will see more of a grappling-heavy Gregory Rodrigues, but again, if you go by any of his fights in the UFC, he's going to go in there and throw hands, and Denis Tiuliulin has incredible power, so if we do get a shot-for-shot kind of fight, this is going to be an amazing one.
The best 11-7 fighter in the UFC.
Sure.
Denis Tiuliulin, he's 1-3 in the UFC as well, but Matt, some big-time fights, and as you know with Fight Night Picks, question mark kicks, we go all the way from the bottom to the top. Again, you can toss a like. You guys are hitting up that chat. Anthony saying that Tiuliulin's going to catch him, and Philip saying Robocop for the win. Third Eye Laser Blast. Yikes. Yikes. Matt Ruscadet's tuning in as well. Karine Silva's taking on Maryna Moroz. This is a rematch. These two fought in 2014. Moroz, I mean, she eats the Superwoman punch. She ends up getting the first round armbar finish, gets signed to the UFC, beats Joanne Calderwood not long after, and we're off to the races for Maryna Moroz. But it's been a really slow burn. She's 31 now. Yeah. She hasn't competed very often whatsoever. Karine Silva, since that fight, 11-2. The two losses are to very good caliber fighters on the regional scene, and the wins continue to pile up. 2 first-round finishes inside of the UFC. Poliana Batalio, that was a performance of the night. I'm surprised the Ketlin Souza fight wasn't a performance of the night as well, because she tore that knee apart. And it was a short notice throw together, just like Blackshear versus Johnson last weekend. But when you look at a fight like this, Maryna Moroz tends to be, from what we've been able to see through all the tape, the more steady fighter when it comes to the fight on the feet. It's a lot of ha-ha, kia, and volume. It's kind of like watching Caitlin Chukagian. But for Moroz, she got that bread buttered for a really long time, going out there playing the volume game. But that 3-fight win streak that she had, we saw the big win over Agapova. We saw Mayra Bueno Silva, who's a top bantamweight. Maryna Moroz is looking really good. And then she fought Jennifer Maia. And I've seen a lot of apologists kind of offer up this. Well, I mean, yeah, like Jennifer Maia was going to win. Nobody had Jennifer Maia to win that fight against Maryna Moroz. So it's hard for me to see that cloud over that fight and kind of see the forest through the trees. But when you look at this one for Moroz, she has the opportunity to now go 2-0 against a buzzsaw Karine Silva. All wins coming by finish for Silva throughout her career.
I just wonder how Moroz is going to keep distance in this fight, because on the outside, she is a good fighter. I know she throws a lot of volume, and they are kind of empty numbers, let's be honest. She'll throw a heavy amount of punches at her opponent, but not all of them are landing. Like, if you look at the strikes landed to strikes thrown, they're not the best-looking numbers. She's like, I don't know, Kyle Schwarber with his barreling. You know, when he hits the ball, it's good, but it just doesn't happen often enough. But for Moroz, I do like the fact that her game does have an obvious counter to it, right? She has the good volume on the feet, and if she is taken down by her opponent, we have seen it on numerous occasions, her armbar is quite effective, and she does have an active guard. I just don't think she's going to be able to do enough on that long to mid distance in this fight, and that's why I do have Silva in the matchup.
Maryna Moroz, this is an insane stat. Her strikes landed per minute in the UFC, 4.19 at a 31% strike accuracy. So she's throwing 12 strikes in a minute, but she's not landing on a lot of it. When you do look at this one in terms of the odds, Karine Silva is favored in the matchup. And if we have a look at Fight Night Picks for the total votes on this one, it's not all that close. 71% going with Silva to get the win. We'll have a look at you over in the chat. Morphitrix saying that Moroz is getting pieced up by Maia. She's just got a solid chin though, but can she take Karine's power? We'll see how that one goes. Kick's good. It's either Silva early or Moroz late. Moroz has a better gas tank. And Russ Godet saying, Moroz is big, but I got Silva. So, yeah, I mean, for Submachine Bug saying Silva gasses halfway through round 1. I mean, the only time where I've really seen her round 2, she gassed that Kihui fight that she had on Contender Series. It looked like she was just kind of blasé in the first round, and then she was able to go out there and get the submission win. I'm still not sold on the Silva gas tank necessarily, but I will take her to win in this matchup. I think this is kind of one of those pretty intense fights to start off a prelim that might get overlooked because the next fight is up a weight class at women's flyweight. We have Andrea Lee taking on Natalia Silva. And for Lee, her last time out, split decision loss to Macy Barber, a very good fighter. Lee is 5-5 in the UFC. She was the Legacy champ, the LFA champ, like Legacy then LFA after the Legacy RFA merger. And for Lee, it's been really close fights with top fighters. It's been like some dominant wins she's had against lesser fighters. Like I think back to the Shevchenko fight, or the fight that Lee had against Cynthia Calvillo, where we couldn't get up off the stool at the end of the second round. When Lee's on, she's on, and she did have a really close competitive fighter with a good one in Macy Barber last time out. So I'd like to know who folks have in this one. Kurtar, Lee is so live to win this fight. She's a good minutes winner. She definitely is. And for Lee, she has that ability to just kind of play around with the dial of time. She can really kind of make it not necessarily boring, but she can hold fights up against the cage.
And that's what she is good at. On the long distance, she does have good straight punches. She can work off the back foot and the front foot as well. But when the fight starts to get hectic, she can just resort to the clinch over and over. And we've seen that on numerous occasions. Now, Lee can make it a little bit stale when she is using that clinch-heavy game plan because it is a little bit reminiscent of kind of late career Holly Holm, you know? You think about the kicks, you think about the at-distance striking, but really when you get to the core of it, it is a lot of that clinch work. And for Lee, she does do a good job of at least winning those moments, which can be quite stale. But again, she's on the more pressure side of it. She's the more aggressive in the matchup. Now, I don't know how she's going to be able to do at some of the kicking range in this matchup because Lee's someone who does use her footwork quite well, but resorts a lot more to her punches and her straight shots to get a lot of her power shots off. And I don't think she's a big puncher by any means, but we have seen her punches do have decent damage when she's able to accumulate them. But I'll be curious to see if her footwork's still going to be effective after she does eat some leg and body kicks throughout this matchup.
And Lee is on a little bit of a skid, having lost her last two. And if you look at it for her, I mentioned this at the start of the week, the takedown against and for in the UFC, she's had 19 takedowns in her 10-fight run. She's given up 22. This is one of those fights where I don't think we get a 23rd or 24th. Natalia Silva is a striker to the nth degree, and we saw her struggle a little bit against the super prospect grappler Teresa Bleda, and everybody went into that fight saying, man, Bleda is such a prospect. They came out of it going, man, her gas tank's poor, she gets hit a lot, and then Bleda goes in there against Gabi Fernandez, and we're all back up on the train. But if you remember the first round of that fight, Bleda was pressuring the action, getting the takedowns, and Silva was able to wear on her, go out there, land her own strikes, and get the win in the third round. Silva's last time out, I mean, she finished Victoria Leonardo impressively, standing TKO victory. So I do have Silva in the fight. I think she can be a little bit speedier in this one, but I have watched some interviews by Andrea Lee. She wants to get back to it. She wants to get the finish. Every fighter, you never hear many fighters going, I'm getting that first round finish. They try and play it aggressive but conservative. They'll go, yeah, I'm going to finish him or her in the second round. Yeah, way to go. But Andrea Lee anticipating a finish in this one in her own right. You have a look at Fight Night Picks in the poll for this one. 80% going with Natalia Silva to get the win. There's always one or two every week where it's 70-80%, and they end up losing. But for this one, I'll go with Natalia Silva.
I've also got Silva. I think we're going to see a bit of a changing in the guard in these first two fights in the card.
All right, so we get into our next one, Matt. Maybe we have a changing in the guard. Andre Petroski's taking on GM3 Gerald Meerschaert, a man who beat Joe Gigliotti, and Joe Gigliotti just went off into obscurity. Then he goes in, he takes on former, well, was he a computer programmer or just a computer scientist? Newfoundland by way of Vancouver, BC's Ryan James, and Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada. That was Meerschaert's second big win. He continued on. He had some high-profile fights. We always think of that Thiago Santos fight. Wasn't able to get it done there. But for GM3, out of 18 total UFC fights, only 2 have gone to decision. So Meerschaert knows how to either get it done or end up getting finished. And for him, since he loses to Khamzat Chimaev, he's only had 1 loss since. So he really has been on a tidy little streak. For Andre Petroski, continues to win in the UFC. And with Petroski, you know how good the wrestling can be. You know how he's going to sink like a guillotine and then try and roll. Like, he really is a pressure grappler, a very strong grappler from what we've seen at middleweight. So I think this is a great fight, but I know a lot of people are talking a lot of good things about Gerald Meerschaert this week, and I like that.
And how could you not? Gerald Meerschaert's kind of like Two-Face from Batman. You know how he flips that coin and that's how he makes all of his decisions? Gerald Meerschaert basically has two sides of that coin.
Tommy Lee Two-Face or Aaron, what's his name?
I'm thinking of the guy from The Dark Knight. Tommy Lee was fun, but still. Gerald Meerschaert, when he shows up Bangkok ready, when he is able to mix his strikes in with his own submission attempts, he's a dangerous fighter no matter where the fight goes. And he is one of those weird guys who he can get stopped early early in fights, but it does feel like once he's able to really settle in and find his timing, his durability does seem to increase as the fight goes on, and that'll be interesting to see against Petroski, because if he is on the back foot, really reacting to a lot of the takedown attempts and the strikes of Petroski, then it could be a really long night for him, because Meerschaert does a lot better when he's the one pushing the action, because Meerschaert is at his best when he's able to pressure you on the feet and then force those poor takedown attempts out of his opponents so he can start capitalizing on submission attempts. It'll be very interesting to see how many of those opportunities he gets, though, because I said at the start of the week quite a bit, Petroski's going to go for a very high volume of takedowns, and every time he does close that distance, that just gives Meerschaert another opportunity, another chance. He might not get the submission every time, but I remember Nick Lentz's coach said this when he fought Will Brooks, very famously guillotined him. Will Brooks was able to take him down a few times, and Nick Lentz put like a lazy guillotine on him, right? But that wasn't for the submission's sake. It was just to set him up for the ultimate one, and I'll be very curious to see if Gerald Meerschaert can do something similar.
You're gonna like it, because in a couple of fights, I'm gonna bring up Nick Lentz again. I've already got it teed up there, but when it comes to Gerald Meerschaert, the interesting thing for him, he moved full-time a few months ago to Killcliff. Who's the head grappling coach there? Nick Lentz is the guy that gets it done. So for Meerschaert, you got to watch out for it. And was he as credentialed of a grappler as Bartosz Fabinski? I would say no. Fabinski runs in there for the takedown, gets himself submitted. So when you do look at this one, Kick's good saying GM3 is like Paul Craig. Lots of underdog sub wins out of nowhere. That is true. Craig Hart saying GM3 does not get enough respect. And Austin Lefebvre, Matt, big swigs out of the Rockstar, eh? Rockstar?
Just thought I'd give it a try.
Yeah, we got to get an energy drink sponsor on the show. Matt, 300 tuning in, not enough
Hello,
likes,
everyone.
but when it does come down to the pick in this one, I don't like going with Petroski. I said that at the start of the week. His strikes are big action strikes. GM3 is a little bit more steady. I know Petroski throws a high volume of big action strikes. He usually sets up his takedowns, and then he's able to dominate on the mat. But none of the three guys that he's fought in the UFC are to the level of grappler Meerschaert. No. Wellington Turman might have his black belt, but Turman's one of the guys that's going to let you take him down and then try and open up his
MMA
jiu-jitsu
grappling
game.
is very different than in-gi jiu-jitsu, where a lot of these belts apply. So Gerald Meerschaert for MMA grappling is really as good as you've seen. I know that sounds wild. You're like, oh, well, shocker, eh? Chris Weidman. But GM3 does have a very high-level submission ability. He might not be the wrestler of some of those other guys, but again, he has the counters to what a lot of wrestlers use. I've only talked about GM3 throughout the whole prediction this week, but I do have Petroski. I just think he's going to be able to land one of those shots. And even though Meerschaert hasn't been finished a ton of times in his career, he does get a little stiff, especially early in fights, and I can see him eating a big shot.
So both of us going with Andre Petroski in the matchup. John Kalachak, you're the first person to figure out that. And yeah, I do things like this every week that nobody notices. I've got one teed up in the graphics for next week. I actually had one teed up in this one. I put B. Joe Piper as the last fight that Gerald Meerschaert had. Brad Katona's taking on Cody Gibson, the renegade who had it made. Have they finally found him? I don't know if they have, but yeah. Cody Gibson's taking on Brad Katona. This is the bantamweight finale of The Ultimate Fighter Season 31. Brad Katona won Season 27 at featherweight. He was able to beat Kyler Phillips, Bryce Mitchell, and then in the finale, Matt, he went up against the mellow fellow, Jay Cuccinello, 30-26 them. So when it does come down to this one, Matt, you have Canada, Winnipeg's own Brad Katona taking on California's own Cody Gibson. Gibson, he was on Tuesday night, the episode of The Ultimate Fighter, kind of the finale of the episodes, and he goes out there and takes on, a tough enough test against Rico DeShulo and gets him down in the first round. DeShulo claimed that he slipped, but I don't know. I mean, he got submitted pretty easily. Gibson, though, knee sleeves, and Michael Chandler said that they knew that Cody's knees were compromised and that they had to go out there and get the finish. So for me, I look at that, like I had my notes done, looking at DeShulo, looking at Gibson. We watched that, we taped that, and I had all these good things to say about Gibson. Like, he gets hit hard, and he might get dropped, but he's not out of the fight. Like his fight against Francisco Rivera. He fights John Dodson. He's fought a high-level competition.
What a backhanded compliment. You look great in anything.
Even being outside of the UFC, Cody Gibson's been really good. I don't know how that knee is, and for Katona, his fight against Timur Valiev was an awesome fight, and I really actually learned a lot about Katona. I thought his striking leveled up from, his time in the UFC, his time with Brave, and then that last fight against Valiev where he gets the win. And I definitely thought that Katona won that one. I know it was a split decision, and one of the judges scored at 29-28 for Valiev, but Katona was out there throwing the hook, throwing the uppercut, and his left to the head or to the body, and then his right, every time he went for a right, he could then fake and go for the takedown. So for Katona, He'll wrestle. Sometimes it's incredibly boring, like his fight against Vega to open up the Ultimate Fighter, or the fights that he had with Brave for the most part. But Katona, he's a very steady Eddie. And I had Brad Katona at the start of the week, and I'm going with Winnipeg's own in this one, hence the Blake Wheeler jersey. But I'd like to get your thoughts on this fight, because it could be a fun one if Cody Gibson's knee and everything's completely 100%.
I don't think it is going to be a fight. I think Katona's going to make it a stale fight, just because it's the easiest path to victory for him. If he's able to go out there and rinse and repeat with his wrestling, I think the top position is going to be dominant enough and active enough to not get stood up. And he does have good ground and pound. He does have good top pressure to where Gibson, if he is compromised, especially his lower half in any way, is going to make it that much more difficult for him to get back up to his feet. Now, Gibson's the more heavy-handed out of the two. If this fight ends in first round TKO, the Cody Gibson's probably going to be the one with his hand raised at the end of this, but I still think Katona's the steadier fighter, and all of his strengths do play into some of Gibson's weaknesses. Plus, you add on that knee injury, you just don't really know where he's at. And I understand, like, the episode is pre-recorded. It's not like he fought this Tuesday, but still, has he been given enough time to really fully recover?
Yeah, and it will be interesting. Stephen Hunt saying 6 years out of the UFC. It's been 8 years since he's been out of the UFC. And if you do consider it, I see Clint saying about the losses for Katona. He lost to Moroz. He got out wrestled in that one. He lost to Hunter Azure, where he wins the first round wrestling. Isn't able to have the success round 2, round 3. Azure's able to kind of hit him a little bit and get the win. 74% at Fight Night Picks going with Katona. Matt, Fight Night Picks. We've got Winnipeg, Canada's own. Maybe I'll take off Shifley on the back of that, and I'll put Jeff Malott. Manitoba Moose's own. It's Mike Malott's brother. He plays for their AHL team. But both of us going with Brad Katona in the matchup, which brings us to the lightweight finale. And I went with one of the bigger underdogs on the card this week and taking Kurt Holobaugh, or at least I thought so at the start of the week. So that we taped that on Sunday. You had Hubbard, I had Holobaugh. I thought Holobaugh, watching his fights on the regional scene since the UFC, watching his UFC fights, watching his fight against Jason Knight, Holobaugh is looking fast. He's looking good with his hands. He's great in boxing range.
35 is really the prime.
He's good on the outside. He's 36. Almost
Craig. 36 is the prime.
Making my point. He's a few weeks away from his 37th birthday. But if you look at it for Kurt Holobaugh, Tuesday night, the end of the Ultimate Fighter, and there's a soundbite from Hubbard and a soundbite from Holobaugh. And Holobaugh goes, yeah, if Austin Hubbard's going to take me down, he better watch out for that guillotine. Are you Georgi Karahanyan or Nick Lentz or Frank Mir against Czech Congo? Kurt Holobaugh, if you're waiting and willing for the takedown and you're going guillotine, it's going to be a bad night out. And Holobaugh, we said this at the start of the week, he's good off his back. He's very, very offensive with his jiu-jitsu. Holobaugh's not one of those guys that when you get him back to the mat, he's going to hook his ankles together and try and hold down on you. He's going to be trying to get his feet up by your hips. He's going to be trying to go for an arm or a sweep. Holobaugh is that dangerous on the mat. And the reason why I had Holobaugh at the start of the week is because I think the way that Holobaugh strikes, 36-37, he's still at a speed advantage over Austin Hubbard. There's some Hubbard fights going back on the rewatch where it looks like he's striking through molasses. So for me, I still have Holobaugh, even though he talked about, I'm going to go guillotine, and that's just a bad thing. But when it comes down to this one, Hubbard, 3-round cardio, incredibly durable, trains in Colorado, and if he can grind out a fight in this one, he can definitely grind out a win.
I just think Holobaugh's going to have a hard time getting the fight in the ranges where he can have the most success. I think Hubbard's either going to be all the way on the outside or all the way on the inside with his wrestling. So for those reasons, I just think it's going to be difficult for Hubbard to start gaining distance and ground via winning rounds, especially on the feet in this matchup, just because of the kicks of Hubbard. If he's able to keep it all the way on the outside, I think it is going to be difficult for Holobaugh to work his way in. And once he does, again, I said it was the same thing for the Marlon Vera Pedro Munhoz fight. The reason I like Vera in that matchup is he fights really well long distance, and then if not, he'll just completely collapse it. I think Hubbard's going to fight with a very similar style.
And when it does come down to this one, Hubbard's about a 2-1 favorite in the matchup. We have a look at Fight Night picks. So Katona, 74% with the fans, and this one 61% going with Austin Hubbard. So let us know, like I said, down there in the chat. Cody Allen, like the Hall of Fame shirt. Brandor, Dustin Bufflin jersey. No, New York Ranger. Blake Wheeler. Blake Wheeler is the jersey. Though I have seen a lot of Big Buff. I don't know if you saw him on the socials. He played that Marion Hossa retirement game. Jeans and flip-flops with no socks. He's big Bufflin. Matt, next fight, Gregory Rodrigues taking on Denis Tiuliulin. Tiuliulin, the Rock'em Soccer. And if you look at it for Gregory Rodrigues, multiple-time jiu-jitsu champ in his native Brazil. They have him as a world champ in jiu-jitsu. I haven't found that. Can't find that, so I can't corroborate it. But when you do look at this matchup, Matt, Gregory's had fights in the UFC, couple of losses that you go back to. Bruno Ferreira, the other loss, a split, and it was close against Armin Petrosian, where Gregory went for the takedowns against Armin and it didn't work. Gregory went for some of them against Junyoung Park and it worked and he got the second round TKO, even though Park had success with his boxing when it was in tight in that one. So if you go back and watch that, I think that was an awesome fight. Gregory was able to go out there and have a wild fight against Chidi and Joe Kwani, get that crazy cut between his eyebrows. Chidi fights next weekend if you're excited about that. He's taking on Hussar, Michael Olashechuk. But when you look at a matchup like this, Matt, I know we were split on the pick at the start of the week, but I think if Gregory goes for the takedowns, Denis Tiuliulin doesn't hold a snowball's chance and HE double hockey sticks in this matchup.
I just don't know if he's going to get the takedowns, though. Like, if he goes for them, that's good, and he probably will be able to complete some, and he's the better grappler. But if he just leaves himself open going for takedowns up against the cage, I can see Gregory Rodrigues eating unanswerable punishment. That's the thing. If he's going for a takedown, Tiuliulin has his legs spread, and Gregory's just really burning his arms out going for those takedown attempts, I think Tiuliulin does have enough power on the in-between and on the inside to at least affect this fight. I'm not saying he's going to knock him out with Travis Brown elbows, but I think his power from those types of distances is going to be able to pay dividends in this fight and at least make Rodrigues a more tentative grappler if he is deciding to go for a grapple-heavy game plan. And on the outside, I think Tiuliulin has more than enough power to deal with Gregory Rodrigues. I know Rodrigues does have all the skills, but at this point in his career, I do worry a little bit about his durability.
Yeah.
He's been in some wild fights, and you can't always judge a fighter by how many fights they've had or how old they are. You have to actually look at each individual fight, and for Rodrigues, he's taken a lot of damage.
And remember what I said at the outset on the original preview video that dropped Sunday night. For Gregory Rodrigues, first time on Contender Series, he's favored to beat Jordan Williams. He eats one sharp left hand and then 15 unanswered punches and he's done, and that's it. So Gregory's had some really hard fights. Over 85% here at Fight Night Picks on Instagram. Going with Rodrigues.
Give me the big underdog then.
The win. Matt going with Denis Tiuliulin. I'm going to go with Gregory Rodrigues in this one. All right, so we look at our next one. This is, of course, the Curtain Jerker 2, the pay-per-view. This is the main card or main event of the pay-per-view. The return of Chris Weidman, his last time out against Uriah Hall. Check leg kick.
Kevin Ware him.
And it's gone. Yeah, Kevin Ware. What happened to him? But Matt, I think he played in the G League after that. No, I know Kevin Ware is. But Matt, for Chris Weidman, taking on Brad Tavares. Tavares heavily favored in this matchup. He's got 80% takedown defense in a long and illustrious decision-filled UFC middleweight career. Tavares, I mean, he had a tough fight his last time out against Bruno Silva, Blindado. And listen, I saw the kind of comments out there. It was on, I think, r/MMA. Brad Tavares doesn't ever want Mark Smith to referee one of his fights again because he thought it was an early stoppage his last time out. So now Tavares gets to try and right the wrongs. He's had some high-profile losses. One of them against Israel Adesanya, one against Edmund Shabazian, UFC 244. So if you look at it for Weidman, 2-6 in his last 8 fights, and that includes losing the belt at UFC 194 to, it's still his son, Luke Rockhold. You look at this one, Matt, so who's the pick here?
This fight's going to go one of two ways. Either Chris Weidman's going to grind his way to a 30-27 decision, and I do think he will win every round if that's the way this fight goes. I think he's going to have a lot of clinch work. I think there's going to be a lot of takedown attempts up against the cage to where there's not a lot happening on either side, or he's able to complete the takedowns, and I think we'll see a similar fight to what we saw against Kelvin Gastelum. I just think style-wise you can compare a little what Gastelum does to Brad Tavares, or on the flip side, Brad Tavares might look like he has the power of Francis Ngannou in his hands, just because Chris Weidman has taken a lot of damage, and I know we haven't seen Weidman get one punch knocked out a ton in his career, but look at the Yoel fight, look at the Jacare fight, the Reyes fight, the Rockhold fight. Like, there have been numerous occasions where Chris Weidman has got hurt by big shots, and again, Tavares isn't a big power puncher. We brought it up many times on this channel. His last 2 stoppage wins are Phil Baroni, a guy who hasn't fought in decades, and Christophe Jacco, who gets to a lot of decision wins, and that was a really nice stoppage by Brad Tavares because he was able to close the distance so well. So maybe we will see him connect on Weidman and have similar effect.
Yeah, and Brad Tavares' last 2 fights, he had a pretty competitive fight against Dricus Du Plessis. He was a top-ranked middleweight at this point, and he was able to go out there against, Bruno Silva. He did get finished, but Tavares has been kind of biting down on the mouthpiece and stepping into some of his shots. Now, he does give up distance, and that's the thing that you worry about taking on a guy like Weidman. So if Weidman goes out there with the takedowns, we'll see how that plays out. But the last time that Weidman did, you referenced a few of those fights, The last time he did was his last win against Omari Akhmedov, and they were completely and absolutely gassed.
That was a way closer fight than I thought it was going to be.
After the second round. So I do have Brad Tavares in this one. We are in agreement on that. We'll see, if everybody's able to enjoy the Joe Pera, Bubba O'Reilly between the prelims and the main card, and then we get set for a big-time matchup at bantamweight. A guy who's main evented multiple shows in a row. It's Chito Marlon Vera. His last time out wasn't able to get the win against Corey Sandhagen, Mr. Tricep injury. And now he takes on Pedro Munhoz. And again, this is one where I took the underdog, and a lot of people were against it. But for Pedro Munhoz, very active with the leg kicks. He can punish you to the body. He can go to the head. And for me, it's what version of Marlon Vera do we get? If we get that version that went on the run here of late, if you get that guy, then that guy can beat Pedro Munhoz for sure, because Munhoz doesn't necessarily move his head when he moves into a lot of these shots. He tends to hold his hands at chest height, and he can play the game where he pops his head back, and if you're going up against a steady jab, being a shorter fighter in Pedro Munhoz, that could be to his detriment. But for me, I like Munhoz, even in the bad spots. If Munhoz has to bring in some of his wrestling, he is very, very good with the jiu-jitsu. Great wrestling room there at American Top Team. So for me, I do have Pedro Munhoz. But again, I know we're split on this one. And for me, I've got Pedro Munhoz.
I genuinely think Marlon Vera is going to get a stoppage win in this fight. And again, I brought it up on numerous occasions. Pedro Munhoz is great at the mid-range. He has leg kicks and really devastating boxing when he's able to land his own hooks. But on the outside, he's not the biggest fighter for this division. Marlon Vera is absolutely huge for bantamweight. And on the inside, Marlon Vera has a really good plum clinch. He does not mind wrapping up his opponent behind the head, throwing those big knees at the middle and the elbows around the side. Well, in the long range, he has the answers. And on the inside, normally he just crowds all the distance unless he is fighting another taller, rangier guy like himself, like you saw in Corey Sandhagen the last time out. So I think we are going to get the more kind of sit in the pocket, sit on his shot Marlon Vera. And for that reason, I think he's going to be able to land consistently on Pedro Munhoz, and that's why I've got him in the matchup.
And I go back, like Jose Aldo. But Aldo had success with the leg kick, success with the takedown, success with closing the gap.
But Jose Aldo's a Hall of Famer, like all-time great at multiple weight classes. Pedro Munhoz has never even fought for a title.
Pedro Munhoz has had good success against good fighters.
He has, but he's not like Jose Aldo. That would be like comparing a guy who's made one All-Star game to somebody who's in the Hall of Fame. I just think there's big levels that we're jumping right now.
All right, Matt. Well, again, going with the big underdog in Munhoz, the bad man, as we nicknamed him when we hit the dartboard. Again, 81% here at Fight Night Picks, going with Vera to get the win.
It's like saying Roy Hibbert's like Hakeem Olajuwon.
People really like to talk about Roy Hibbert more than Hibbert deserves. Matt, the next matchup, this one's at bantamweight on short notice earlier on this week. Damon Blackshear takes the cake, and last weekend he gets a twister win against Jose Johnson, who was a short notice replacement in a fight that was supposed to be Brady Heastand. So you've got Blackshear, who's getting ready for a wrestler. Then he gets a striker who has bad takedown defense. He takes him down, he submits him, and then he puts his hand up and he gets Mario Bautista, who, if you put these two guys together stylistically, let's go through a fun game. Boxing, rate both of them out of a series of 10. Go Damon Blackshear first. What do you say out of 10?
6.
I'd give it a little bit more. I'm going to say 6.5.
If 10's like Max Holloway, then...
Mario Bautista, what do you give him?
Different kind of boxer. So I'll say like 6.5.
Okay, I have them about the same for their boxing. I think for wrestling, Damon Blackshear to 10, what do you give him?
7.
I was gonna say 7. Like he's
neither guy's getting a 10 out of 10 in this exercise.
Damon Blackshear, consistent with it, 3-round cardio. I've seen it before, 5-round cardio.
Great grappler too to go along with the wrestling.
And Mario Bautista in about the same spot. I might say 6.5, maybe 7. Like he's in the same spot.
It'd be like 7 offensively and then like a 5.5 defensively.
And so when you put those two things together, even on the short notice nature, I think this is going to be a very, very close fight, and that's why I have a hard time making a pick on it. And I don't just say that to be like, oh, Mario Bautista's a 3-1 favorite, and I have a hard time picking him, but I'm going with him. 57% at Fight Night Picks going with Bautista. The fans have this one as a close fight too. So I think it's going to be a tough one for Bautista. Originally getting ready for Garbrandt, who's going to try and box with you on the outside. Has the wrestling, but we never see it out of Garbrandt until, what was it, the 4th round against Rob Font, I think?
It's like talking about Shogun's BJJ. Yeah. You're just, where is it?
You don't really get to see that very often. But Matt, for me, I do have Bautista, but it wouldn't shock me if Blackshear get a big big. I have big in brackets. But
I mean, I'd be a little
upset win.
surprised if the guy won when he knew he had this matchup less than a week ago. Like, that's a fair thing to say that you would be surprised if it happened, even though it is a big upset. Because Blackshear has all the skills to win this fight. You just wonder if the rebound from not only the weight cut, but the performance itself is going to be a little bit too much to fight a guy in Batista, who, again, he's been getting ready for this date for a meaningful period of time. And when you are going to fight a guy like Cody Garbrandt, you probably are going to train every single area of your game, even though, yes, you're going to focus a lot on your boxing offense and defense. So I do have Mario Batista in this fight, but it should be much closer than the odds suggest. I'll say that.
Yeah, it definitely should. CL, Damon all the way. But Damon, truther since Craig. First time Craig mentioned him. Were you here in 2018, CL? Were you here, really? At FightNightPicks.net at that point. So, Matt, both of us going with Mario Bautista, but a really good fight at bantamweight. Then we get the welterweights, and I don't enjoy listening to Ian Gary speak. I got to be completely honest.
But he
with
trained
you.
in a bar. Craig.
I'm so over the Ian Gary slog. Like, oh, I'll take you down, DC. I'm done with it. But after his last fight, he goes down to shoot the box. He trains with Charles Oliveira, Diego Lima. He comes back up, training out of Killcliff. He's getting ready for a totally different opponent. And then, what was it? Like a week ago, a little over a week ago, opponent flip. He gets Neil Magny instead of Jeff Neal. And then Ian Gary automatically starts to train with Phil Rowe, who just fought Neil Magny, 54 days ago to a split decision. So when it does come down to this one, Matt, Neil Magny, if he goes out there, holds on, pressures up, or if he's able to strike from the outside, he could have success. But for me, I don't think he's going to have success on the outside because we've seen it with Magny. Pick the opponent. Jeff Neal wasn't able to do it, surprisingly. But when Magny's eaten some of these bigger shots, like against Max Griffin, like against Shavkat, we've kind of seen a little bit of a lapse and a delay. And I think that's where Gary can kind of pull away. Gary, judo black belt. He's a decent enough grappler in his own right. So I do have Ian Gary in this one. But boy, I don't want to hear it after the mic if he does win.
I don't care about
Just
these people outside the cage.
Skip it and go to the co-main event.
Fights, not anything else. For Neil Magny, he has been there and done that. He is in this situation where you just know exactly where he sits in the welterweight division because he's basically fought everybody in and outside the rankings at this point of his career. But I don't like the way he does tend to stiffen up when he's getting hit by big shots. And he does do a much better job defensively when he's moving forward than when he has his back up against the cage because he will get into that little kind of Anthony Smith posture where he's kind of just leaning back, accepting a lot of the damage. And if he finds himself in that position against a big puncher like Ian Gary, I don't think the fight's going to go that much longer after he is behind those two black lines stationary against the fence. Neil Magny has all the skills to win this fight because he's got the experience factor on his side, but I just don't think he's going to be able to stand up to a lot of the bigger shots that Ian Gary throws his way.
Decision win leader in UFC history, Neil Magny. 83% of the fans at Fight Night Picks going with Ireland's Ian Gary to get the win. He's got that dove tattooed on the back of his head. Big one there for Ian Gary. Both of us going with Gary to get the win. Co-main event. Zhang Weili taking on Amanda Lemos. We'll see if that speed advantage or perceived speed advantage, if it's able to play out for Zhang Weili. Weili taking on Lemos. A fresh matchup at the top of the strawweight division. When you consider it, belt on the line. Lemos 3 fights ago. She's losing to Jessica Andrade, who's on a bad skid at this point. But she comes out 2 big wins since. Michelle Waterson Gomez and Maryna Rodrigues. They're going to rematch. How fun is that?
Ooh.
That might be one where you go to the store and get something to eat. I've never been this negative. But when you do look at this matchup, Matt, for Zhang Weili, whether she's training at Fight Ready or Bang Tao or Syndicate, because she's going to have John Wood in her corner, we'll see how it goes for her. Again, I think she has a little bit of a speed advantage. Obviously, it's going to get interesting if it does hit the mat because for Lemos, you can see on her Instagram training a lot of her grappling. And it's an area of her game that we just really haven't seen in the UFC. So for me, I do have Zhang Weili in the matchup. But yeah, it'll be an interesting fight while it lasts.
Again, I compared this fight to GDR versus Amanda Nunes #2 because I think it's going to follow a very similar game plan to where Lemos is going to have way more success in the feet than I think a lot of people realize. She has good pop at the end of her shots, a wide variety of strikes too, and we've seen Weili struggle with kicking range in a lot of her opponents. Rose is able to knock her out with the head kick, of course. Joanna had a lot of success with the kicks as well, and if Lemos is able to get her leg and body kicks into effect in this matchup, then it might slow down Weili just enough to make her a much easier target to hit with her own boxing. And again, I think Weili is the more skilled fighter in terms of her wrestling, her grappling, and yes, her striking can probably match a lot of what Lemos does too, but I think Lemos is going to win a round, maybe even 2 with just her striking, and make this fight a lot closer than I think people realize, because I think what a lot of people look at when they look at this fight is Weili has all the skills in the toolbox, and Lemos is slightly one-dimensional. I think that one dimension, though, is going to be able to at least go out there and win her some moments in this matchup. Even though I do have Weili, I think this is going to be a very competitive fight.
The fans don't. At Fight Night Picks, 86% going with Zhang Wei Li, and I'd like to hear who you have in this matchup, the co-main event, because it's a big-time title fight, and you have a lot of challengers kind of making their way up through the ranks. Chief among them, Tatiana Suarez. I saw she was on Extra Rounds Radio. Bilal Muhammad. I mean, some real heavy hitters. TJ DeSantis doing it over there on Fight Pass. So hopefully Suarez gets that shot next, whoever wins this one. But it's a very, very big-time fight. And then we move into the main event of the evening. You guys can hit this one up over in the chat. 60% going with Aljamain Sterling to get the win in the matchup. And Sterling taking on Sugar Sean O'Malley. 16-1 right now. He's absolutely rolling.
Welcome to the Sugar Show!
Yeah, I mean, do you love that? The 2017, some new tattoos since that point, but ultimately a great shot for him. But he kind of hits right now like Dame Dalla. And I know we listened to a little bit of Dame Dalla before this one. Different on levels the Lord allows. Really doing it for the people. Matt, Sean O'Malley, his last time out, beat the former champ, Petr Yan, by split decision. I thought that O'Malley had won 2 rounds. I know that's crazy. I said earlier on this week that Basil Hafez beat Jack Della Maddalena. I scored that one 29-27 JDM. So
that's what I mean. That's why I said round 3 was closer to a 10-8.
Have that for what it's worth. Submachine Bug saying, I hate both these guys. Do you know them personally, or are you talking about us? Because I don't know you. But when it does come down to this one, Matt, I mean, Sterling versus O'Malley. If they decide to strike, Sean O'Malley's got a pretty darn good shot. If it goes to the mat, I saw O'Malley get taken down and not able to use a lot of jiu-jitsu against Petr Yan, but the talk around O'Malley since he came into the UFC, Tim Welch, Tanquinho, Augusto Mendes, like he's got all these great grapplers, Bryce Meredith, training out of the MMA lab. We just haven't seen it yet, so if we haven't seen it, then how do I know if it's there? For Sean O'Malley, the other thing about this one, he hasn't fought a main event in the UFC, period. He hasn't fought a 5-round pro mixed martial arts contest. He's fought 5-round amateur fights. The last 5-round fight that I saw for Sean O'Malley was in 2014, but those are 5 3-minute rounds, which is the equivalent of 1 full regular MMA fight. So for me, I do have Aljamain Sterling. I do think that, A, wrestling advantage. B, I've seen the gas tank, and he can keep it pretty steady. So I do have Sterling. If O'Malley goes out there and Marlon Moraes him, that'd be kind of wild.
That would be.
For me, I do have Sterling in this one. And for the fans, kick's good. Sterling 5+ takedowns. Submachine Bug saying no, the bro's fighting. Sean Glenn hitting up the super chat saying 16-0. It is what it is. Daryl McKinley, Aljo's too good on the ground. KP saying Sugar by sub. Derek saying Aljo by backpack under 2. And Stepan Park saying I think Aljo is a bit nervous. So we'll see how it goes. But VT says, gonna be a good one. And I think it's gonna be a good one as well.
Sean O'Malley has another thing in common with Damian Lillard, too. I don't think he's gonna become champion. There you go. For Sean O'Malley, he does have all of the A-tier skills that you look for in a title challenger. He has the speed, he has the power on the end of his shots, and he does have a unique body type for this division, right? He's long, he's rangy, and guys who seem to cut, maybe he doesn't even cut that much weight because he is so wiry, but still, guys normally don't have the speed that he has in a division when you're built like him, but he's able to get from point A to point B so fast that it's really difficult for his opponents to just react on those in-betweens. But for O'Malley, and you bring it up with the lack of 5-round experience, he's a bit like Alec Manoa, right? Alec Manoa saw a lot of success early on in his MLB career, but the problem was he never had a minor league career to go back on, right? He just doesn't have the amount of innings and the amount of experience to really have the idea as to, okay, this is what it takes to be a top-level pitcher. Craig hates this right now. But for Sean O'Malley, I would have really liked to have seen a 5-round fight on the way up to a title shot. We talked about it at the start of the week. Brad Tavares had a really big opportunity at one point. He headlined a 5-round main event fight against Israel Adesanya, and that was Adesanya's first chance to really prove, hey, I belong to be in that spotlight. And I know Sean O'Malley had that really close fight with Jan. Personally, I had it for Jan, but it was a close fight. I can't argue with him no matter who you had. But it would have been nice to at least see how he looks in the 4th and 5th round of a difficult fight.
Alex Pereira didn't have any 5-round MMA fights, and then he fought Israel Adesanya and he
I'm
won.
not saying it's perfect. I'm just saying for the most part, it's nice to have it on the resume.
And when it does come down to it, you know, you look at a guy like Cutter Crawford just cutting up the Yankees, and poor Garrett Cole, shortest outing this year was today. 6 innings and 4 innings, or 6 runs and 4 innings. When you look at this one, again, 60% of the fans
what does that have to do with Alec Manoa being trash?
Sterling. Everybody can have a bad day or a bad year. Bad year, yeah, it happens. Not everybody can be perfect all the time. But when you look at this one, yeah, for me, I do have Aljamain Sterling. The fans, though, here are pretty split.
I'm surprised the votes are so close. I really did expect at the start of the week that they'd be closer to like 75-25 for Aljamain Sterling. Just because he does have that much experience at the highest level. And I know people might be sour on him based on the first Jan fight, right? It was the weird disqualification. That's how he was able to win the title. But the second Jan fight was pretty impressive. And the way he was able to go out there and handle Henry Cejudo, who we all know is one of the more talented mixed martial artists of all time, has been really impressive. And I thought that would have got him, maybe not the fanfare, but at least the respect of how skilled he is.
Even the way the end of the fourth round ended against Cejudo, where he's kind of reversing position, able to out-grapple, landing a big combo, and then the round's over. And Joe Rogan went from saying this is a close round to that was a dominant round after 20 seconds. But I do have Sterling in the matchup. At Fight Night Picks, 57% of the fans were going with Sterling over there. Almost 500 tuning in on a Saturday afternoon. Give yourselves a thumbs up there down below the video. It'd be much appreciated on our end. We had Sean hitting up that super chat earlier on saying 16-0 for Sean O'Malley. You can hit it up there as well if you'd like. But if you know from Fight Night Picks, we're going to go recap this one really quick in short order. First fight on the card, a rematch that you might not have known, but now you do. Karine Silva taking on Maryna Moroz. I have Karine Silva in this one.
I've also got Silva.
All right, next matchup. Andrea Lee taking on Natalia Silva. Toughest tests of Silva's career. First real ranked fighter here. And Lee's looking to hold on to that top 15 rank. I have Natalia Silva, but I think it's going to be a competitive fight.
This is probably the first back-to-back Silva pick in the history of Fight Night Picks. I just don't know how many other opportunities have ever come up, but I've got Silva in this matchup as well.
All right, next one. We have Andrea Petroski taking on Gerald Meerschaert. Wouldn't surprise anybody. People in the chat that are all over Petroski, really, behind the keyboard, they're like, man, that GM3 guy's got a chance to win. And I would say GM3, he's always live, but I do have Petroski here.
So do I. Just worry about GM3's ability to eat damage at this stage of his career. Because at 35, he's been in some wild fights.
Yes, he has. We've got Brad Katona, Winnipeg Zone. And I've got Katona to beat Cody Gibson. We'll see how the knee plays out for Gibson. We saw that in The Ultimate Fighter. But yeah, I do have Katona with the takedowns.
I think it's going to be a lot of top pressure, a lot of takedowns. And for those reasons, I have Brad Katona.
C. Von Boss saying Petroski is overrated, man. Who's rating him? At lightweight, Austin Hubbard taking on Kurt Holobaugh. I've got Holobaugh, but again, if he's trying to go for guillotines and not defending takedowns, he could easily lose his fight to Austin Hubbard.
I've got Hubbard, but let's make this abundantly clear. The Ultimate Fighter winners as of late have not gone on and done absurdly great things in the UFC.
Wait, Brett, what's Brad Katona doing?
Kurt Holobaugh and Austin Hubbard were in the UFC, weren't any longer, and then now they're making their way back. So even, it doesn't really matter who wins this. I'll be very curious to see what kind of success they have afterwards and what type of matchups they get moving forward. But I do have Austin Hubbard.
All right, next one, we have Gregory Rodrigues taking on Denis Tiuliulin. I've got RoboCop to get the win in this one.
Give me Tiuliulin. I've never picked an 11-7 fighter, I don't think. Again, just don't know how many opportunities have ever come up, but I'll take him in this one.
I'd be like old-time UFC. Go watch, not junior, but Lance Gibson Sr. fight in the UFC. Look at the records of guys back then. Chris Weidman's taking on Brad Tavares. I'll go Brad Tavares in this one.
He's 39, but he's still his father's boy. I have Brad Tavares, though. Again, I'll be curious to see just what kind of style Chris Weidman employs in this matchup, because if he does go into this fight trying to work the jab to then improve his takedowns, I think he's going to eat some shots from Brad Tavares as a result, because Tavares does do a good job moving backwards.
I made a reference earlier on this week, the Cody Gibson fight against Brad Katona. Right at the end, I said, Cody Gibson, he's got to find something in a Princess Auto parts catalog. And I didn't explain what Princess Auto is. For you Americans, it's like Harbor Freight Tools, and their catalog for 2023 is like a Sears wish book.
Nothing like explaining a joke a week later.
Something Americans get on. So maybe Chris Weidman got himself a break spoon for that leg. We'll see what happens. But Matt, I do have Chris Weidman in this one as well. Marlon Vera is taking on Pedro Munhoz. I got the leg kick king, Thud Jesus, Pedro Munhoz to get the win.
Craig goes back to a comedy club a week later. I get it now, guys. I understand. I've got Marlon Vera in the matchup. I think he's got youth on his side. I think he's got enough pop at the end of his shots to hurt Pedro Munhoz. One of the wildest stats of all time, and Munhoz brings it up quite a bit, is, hey, I've never been dropped. I've got a really good chin. I've trained with a lot of boxing world champions. At one point, that chin is going to wear out, and I think this could be the matchup.
All right, next matchup, Blackshear taking on Bautista. I think it's a really close fight. I ever so slightly have Bautista, but I'm excited about the fight today, don't get me wrong. This is one that I have earmarked in the co-main event, the main event, that I'm really jazzed up to watch.
I've got Bautista in the matchup. Should be a good fight.
All right, Matt. Magny taking on Ian Machado Gary. Give me Gary.
I've also got Gary. Hopefully this fight does go past the first round, though, and it's not a quick stoppage, just so we see more out of Gary's game, because Yuri Shavkat Rakhmonov, every fight that he has where he moves up the rankings, we have to see a little bit more, right? The matchups get a little bit tougher, so we see a little bit more of his game. For Ian Gary, we've never really seen game plan B or C. It's still normally, hey, I'll hit you with bigger shots than you can hit me for the most part. So I would be curious to see, how is he going to face it if he is getting taken down by Neil Magny? If he has to work his way back into the fight the longer it goes.
We did see him withstand adversity in the Song Kanon fight, and he was able to rally back.
Oh, he got hurt for sure, but it's not like we're seeing him go for crazy submissions all the time. Like for Gary, it's still a lot of that march forward. I'm going to eat a couple shots and then deliver my own big power ones. Not that Magny's some dangerous puncher by any means, but again, Magny can get off to a lead that's difficult to close the distance on.
And we saw Darian Weeks try and do that. Pressure, forward, clinch. He wasn't able to do it. Weeks is a good wrestler. Neil Magny can get it done in the wrestling department as well. Zhang Weili's taking on Amanda Lemos in this one. I've got Ian Still in the matchup.
I think this is going to surprise a lot of people. I could even see it going to the end and they're like, and a split decision win for Amanda Lemos, just because a lot of the rounds will probably be very close, because it's going to come down to how much activity can Wei Li get off, not only on the outside, but with her own grappling, because Lemos does have quite devastating punches, and if she's able to land a few early on, it's going to prevent her from overextending and really forcing the action in the second and third round, so it might be able to help her conserve her gas tank, because when the fight does go to the fourth and fifth round, I do favor Wei Li quite a bit in those two rounds.
And the cardio that I kind of slagged on a little bit in Lemos' fight against Angela Hill, she was able to show improvements big time against Marlon Rodrigues her last time out. So Anne's still in the co-main event. The main event, Matt, it is Aljamain Sterling taking on Sean O'Malley. You guys, 500 thereabouts tuning in right now. Lord Nikon, Matt is underestimating Wei Li's power. Have you ever been hit by Zhang Wei Li in your life? Hard to estimate, I think.
Wouldn't it be wild if I said yes?
Yeah, I went
When would a man on the east coast of Canada ever bump into Wei Li?
Well, Matt, next weekend, main event, it's Max Holloway taking on the Korean Zombie from Singapore. A rematch in the co-main event. Anthony Smith taking on Ryan Spann. So make sure you check that one out from the channel here next week. But in this main event, Sterling taking on Sean O'Malley. For me, I've got an Ann still in this one as well, but it's a fresh matchup, and I like that. And these two guys, they like to jaw. So
it's a weird fight. If it goes to decision, Aljamain is probably going to win like a 49-46 and be quite dominant. But it's a fight that I still think O'Malley can win, and especially early on with the amount of pop that he has in the end of his shots. Aljamain Sterling does kind of move in a wonky way on the outside before he's able to implement all of his volume when he's able to really start moving downhill. And on the outside where he is kind of doing that weird herky jerk with his shoulders, I can see Sean O'Malley popping him with a big straight right and or left that could really get his respect and hurt him. But again, I think Aljamain has more skills, so you're kind of going to pick him.
Yeah, I mean, a lot to really dissect in a fight like this. I was thinking back in my head, remember that Andre Sukumtoth fight, how wild that one was? And then it kind of stunted my brain for like a good 2 seconds. But when you do consider this one, Aljamain Sterling, the other thing that concerns you is weight cut was on point, but the constant talk of 145, 145. Kamaru Usman was the very best.
How many times a week do you think you find yourself stopping and thinking about Andre Sukumtoth?
Too much. And his dad.
Sir, this is a Wendy's parking lot.
His dad, a great coach in the Northeast. But for Sterling, the talk of 45. Usman, it was always not even middleweight. We're going all the way up to 205. We're going to take on Jan Blachowicz, and then gets blasted by...
He was also getting
Leon
old
Edwards.
anyways, though.
So
let's be honest.
When it does come down to this one, I mean, people saying Sean O'Malley's overrated. Stepan Park saying, does Aljo get a rematch if he loses? I don't think so. I think he makes the move up to 145. I think he's opening up the division in a way to Merab, and I think with Sean O'Malley kind of constantly calling out Cheeto, if Cheeto beats Munhoz, there's more juice to that one than there is a Merab fight against Sean O'Malley, so they probably make the fight against
This
Cheeto.
is just me being 100% honest. There's not a fight I want to watch less than Sean O'Malley versus Merab Dvalishvili for 5 rounds. See Merab go like 38 for 52 on takedown attempts with 22 minutes of top control. That doesn't sound like a fun time to me. I'm sorry. I don't care how talented Sean O'Malley is off the mat. Hopefully we see some side of that today. But I couldn't imagine how stale a Merab Sean O'Malley matchup
Brad
would be.
Katona out there salivating, saying, yeah, I did better than you did, Sean O'Malley.
Cody
Matt,
Gibson?
the way the UFC is now, toss a like on your way out. Make sure you check out that video for next week. Again, Holloway taking on Korean Zombie. We got a lot of fighters that you don't see a lot of second times out as well. Quite a few fighters that were featured on Road to UFC from last year that finished up this year. So a lot of stuff to look forward to coming up next weekend. You're going to want to keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt. And as we always say,
Let's get into it.